Welcome back, you guys. I'm Nini FC. This is Blue Lines TV, and today I'm joined by a very special guest in Joe Tweedie, where we're going to be discussing a talking point that I feel is something that has to be discussed and debated upon. You know, it's not about, discussing negatives. It's not about saying Tuchel's not good enough or trying to force Tuchel versus Lampard comparisons, but it's about speaking about our lack of creating chances, our lack of scoring goals, and of course, whether this could be a potential issue that we could face even more as the season does progress. So if we're going to discuss something big like this, of course, you guys, I got to bring on Joe Tweedie. And before we get into things, you might be wondering, Ian, you're looking extremely relaxed right now. Of course, you guys, I'm still healing up right now. Doctors told me I'm going to be out for that 6 to 8 weeks. So, I've got to find ways to still produce that content, as well as, looking after my golden balls as well. You know what I mean? So you guys got to get used to me just looking relaxed and just trying to, get through this, to be honest. But, without me just blabbling on about myself right now, let's discuss the important stuff. Joe, how you doing today, man?
Yeah, really good, man. Yeah, glad that you're on the mend. I know the pain all too well from what you're going through. So yeah, nice to see you on your feet and still actually amazingly delivering content. I know this is a little bit of an aside, but the fact that you still did like a match review of the Atletico game, like the night of or like the morning after, I thought that was absolutely insane. But yeah, well played for that as well.
Appreciate that, man. Appreciate that. But yeah, of course, the game versus Manchester United yesterday. Positive was, we didn't lose. Tuchel's undefeated record does continue. But talking points, the focus, the highlights were on our lack of creating chances. And it has been something we have been seeing for a while. It's been something we've been discussing for a bit too, in regards to maybe Tuchel emphasizing defense over attack. My question for you is, do you feel like Tuchel is going to find that balance as the season does go on? Or do you feel like Tuchel maybe has to rethink his ideas behind a back three if he hopes for us to start scoring more goals and creating more chances?
Yeah, good question to start with. I think that there is probably two elements here. I think one is that I feel certainly, and this isn't really Tuchel specific, you could apply this to Lampard, even Maurizio Sarri, in terms of sort of players that have been here for that kind of extended period. I don't really look at this team and look at the kind of profile players that we have across the squad and see like tons of goals. There's not like a massive obvious goal threat. And even in the past when we've had teams, we've had guys who can contribute from all areas. You look at this season, I don't see anyone particularly in that front line to me that really inspires me in terms of the fact that they're going to, one chance in a big game that they're going to convert it. And I think, first of all, in terms of looking at Tuchel's style of play and everything that comes to mind, the fact that we don't maybe have the killer instinct or the ability to be super, super creative in the final third, I think a little bit of that is down to the personnel. And I think, we have spoken sort of very recently, actually, about Erling Haaland. And I think that is an obvious target for the club to go get someone who has that X factor when it comes to finishing and being creative, being a consistent threat. So I think, first of all, the first part of the answer probably covers that in terms of the players that we have. Nobody really, apart from Timo Werner, who we're seeing maybe is not necessarily translating as well as we would have liked this season in terms of his goals. Nobody else really in that team is somebody who has consistently, banged goals in at whatever level. We saw Pulisic have that little purple patch at the end of last season. Yeah. If you go back to his Dortmund numbers, he's a 3, 4, 5, 6 goal a season guy in the league. He's not a 10, 15, 20 goal a season player. And the same could be said for a lot of players in the team. I think the second thing as well that obviously you touched on in terms of the system that we're playing, the shape that we're playing. You look at the sort of the team that finished the match yesterday. You can make an argument with Mason Mount's ability to be super destructive and super defensive from that kind of number 10 position. We have kind of virtually 7/8 defensive players on the pitch at sort of any given time. You've got the back three, you've got a very, very defensive and very, very limited in terms of contributions in terms of the attacking third and attacking play in terms of the double sixes or the pivot. You've got two wing backs who, when Callum plays there, does get forward, but still has obviously defensive responsibilities. And when Reece plays there, I think we saw what Tuchel say, in terms of his substitution, that he brought Reece on to basically counter the Rashford and some of the movement that they were having in that area. So both wing backs pretty defensive, pivots defensive. You've got a back three, so you're already starting the game really with virtually 7 7 players or whatever in terms of the
Yeah.
team, as well as the goalie. So you've got 8 guys who are not really, in my opinion, going to contribute to the attacking play. And a lot of people I've seen recently talking about, the final third, the build up of phases, the building up of play, it happens and it starts at the back. If you move the ball slowly, if you are very tentative, if you are very passive in terms of your movements, in terms of your decision making, it doesn't matter if you have this final third that has all these amazing players in. Yes, obviously 3 world-class players will probably do more than what we have at the moment, but the fact that the ball takes so long to progress up the pitch, and the fact that there's such a lack of imagination, I think, and a lack of creativity in midfield areas, in wide areas, certainly when Callum isn't playing in particular. And although against United we did see Rudiger carry the ball out of defence and play some nice long passes, that's not really the norm for what we've seen of this team. And it's no real surprise to me that I think the best chance we had in the first half, and probably also with Reece James as well, came from us, instead of sort of doing this very patient play, actually just playing longer.
Yeah.
I think Rudiger did that massive crossfield pass to Callum that set up the opportunity for him to put a dangerous cross in. And I think a little bit that is one thing that you can pick on Tuchel's game model at the moment, is that I think the patient and very sort of possession-based style that he has, it works fantastically in terms of limiting the chances the opposition have in terms of countering. It leaves us in a really solid position, very, very kind of structured, very defensively sound. But what it doesn't really allow for, and I think what we're seeing, is that when we have to be the aggressor in games, when we have to kind of be on the front foot.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking a little bit on the Atletico game here, Nini in particular, we were camped outside their penalty box for pretty much the entire game. And yet when you think of that game there, in terms of the clear-cut chances, it took a ridiculous overhead kick from Olivier Giroud to break the deadlock. And we don't, I think, necessarily have the profile of midfielder to be creative from central areas. In terms of the front line, Timo Werner, we're not playing to his strengths. I think at times it's a little bit silly sometimes to play him in some of these games where we're quite clearly trying to look to feet, come short, build play up, and he literally just wants to run in behind. So I think it's a little bit to do with the personnel. I think the structure, the tactics that Tuchel employs, this very patient style of play, when coupled with the fact that we do not have, for me, certainly good passers in midfield areas, and not even that, people who are willing to take the chance to try and play that pass.
Yeah.
This all kind of comes together as like a cocktail for just having very, very little creativity. I think when people look at the way the team is set up, just chopping, let's say, you've got a few people that would say take Mason Mount out and put someone else in, or take Timo out and put another attacking player in. It's not as simple as just sort of doing one-for-one replacements. You've got to look at the way that we are creating chances. And I think that the biggest overall flaw that I can see, if you look at sort of yesterday's game, is that we were kind of engineering shooting opportunities for Kovacic and Kante, which to me, that cannot be the game model. That cannot be the way that we're designing the system, because of all the players in the team to present shooting chances to, and even then they're not particularly great chances. But are you really setting up a team so that Kova can have a shot from 35 yards out?
Yeah.
It doesn't really seem to be the kind of the way that you would necessarily try to win games. So yeah, you've got those two elements. You've got the system. I think the system is very passive. I think it encourages very patient style of play, which is fine. But then you have to have the spark, the Eden Hazard, the kind of player who can take very, very static games and give you that explosive moment of quality to break the deadlock. We don't have the Eden Hazard, and I think in terms of the passive style of play, I don't think necessarily that it really helps us in terms of build-up, in terms of creativity, in terms of breaking teams down. Often, by the time we get into the final third, I mean, you look at it yesterday, look at it against Atletico, they have completely reset in their defensive organisation because we moved the ball so quickly. So those two things, I think, are the key things there.
Yeah, everything you're saying, these patterns been seen for a very long time. I mean, of course, the slowness from passing out from the back as well, the build-up phases at the back. I feel like at times there can be a few too many passes, and by the time it gets into the final thirds, opponents are outmanning us. It's getting outmanned, and then no matter if you've got two wing backs, tugging the touchlines, keeping their positions wide, you've got 3 guys in between the lines. I mean, against teams that are parking the bus, parking deep. I mean, teams have adopted that approach ever since we had Antonio Conte as our manager. So no surprise to me that there's kind of like a tactic against competing against that. And my thing is, Do you think Tuchel does know this? Because he has mentioned in certain press conferences future plans in regards to Hudson-Odoi, potentially playing on the left wing, something that he specifically mentioned. And of course, how he still hasn't introduced Kai Havertz as yet into the team. He said that if it wasn't for the injury in the game against Man United, we would have seen Kai coming on as a false sign in that game. But do you feel maybe now is the time maybe to adopt things to maybe a four at the back? I feel like personally the team needs an extra man in the final third. I think for all the good work that's done, that key man, that extra man is definitely key. For me, I look at Ziyech and I do feel like we're not really getting the best out of him with how we're using him. He's not the type of guy that is like Bruno Fernandes that's going to be doing a lot of running off the ball and looking to get on the end of balls instead of being the guy to instigate the movement off the ball. You know what I mean? It does feel like maybe our lack of goals could come to bite us in the end. Yeah. And in your opinion, do you feel maybe we could be seeing a change of formation quite soon?
Yeah, I think this is probably the $1 million question in this whole kind of scenario that we're looking at the moment. And I think the easiest way to look at it is that you have, I think this is not something that I've kind of uniquely spotted, but I think a lot of people have suggested, you have a system that I think very much suits the defenders at the club. Yeah. So the back three, I think, in terms of looking at the past, 3-4 years or however many years that certain players have been here, I think that certainly Rudiger and Christensen look good in the back three. They're very solid. I think their performances have been very good. But you and I both know that when you switch to a back four, that we've seen, consistently poor in some cases, average kind of performances from them in a back four. Yeah. So you're kind of using the back three, I think, really to give a foundation of solidity. I think this all comes from Tuchel's analysis of the team, just thinking that first of all, I need to stop the teams conceding goals. So he's gone for a very kind of defensively minded three at the back system that obviously gets his captain into the team. It's probably the only position that Azpilicueta can play at this level in the first team at the moment is that right-sided centre-back spot. Christensen, obviously Rudiger, they are playing well at the moment. There's no denying that. My question would be, I think probably something you've alluded to in multiple sort of streams that I've heard you talk about, is the long-term potential of playing this system or switching to a back four, particularly with both of them at the club. And I think from that sort of perspective that, it's difficult because you have, you've got Alonso as a wing back, potentially Reece James. I don't think necessarily suits the right wing back spot. Same with Ben Chilwell. But it feels like you're putting a system in place that covers probably Jorginho and Cover very much in terms of the cotton wool that they're wrapped in terms of the system, not leaving them in space, giving them a very solid platform with three guys behind them, two guys defending the wide channels. So Cover, Jorginho, you could say Rudiger, Christensen, probably Aspi. So those five players, I think, and again, if you're looking at Marcos Alonso, you could stretch that to six. Those six players specifically, I think the system is built to play around. And I think Tuchel has alluded to wanting to play senior players to kind of push the team up the table. That's more than fine. But I think it does massively isolate, and I think to your point earlier in terms of getting the best out of Ziyech, but also lots of other players, it doesn't allow you to get your best attacking players on the pitch. And the problem that we will have, certainly looking at the United game and even the Atletico Madrid game, we were very much in control, but I said bar that sort of one moment of utter genius, we weren't really sort of creating and dominating and smashing them to pieces. You're going to have to at some point accept that for Chelsea to win games, to push ahead and try to claim a spot in the top four, you've got to start taking some risks. And personally, from a completely personal opinion, I would look at the back four and I would try and play 4-3-3. I think that way you can at least start putting some of your more attacking pieces on the table. I still think with Kante and potentially Cover and Mount as the three in the midfield, you've got the legs, you've got some physicality in there, you've got protection. You get Reece James back at his best position as a right back. I think a lot of people forget with Reece as well, probably up until December before he was injured, he might have been our best player. I know Mason's been consistent for the whole season, but Reece
I agree.
Really was.
I fully agree. I think, we're also forgetting back in the time when we were using a back four as well, we were keeping clean sheets. We were doing things that we weren't seeing last season. We stopped conceding from set pieces. We started scoring from them. We were limiting teams on the counter-attack as well. We went on a great run where we were limiting the amount of chances opponents had against us. And for me, this is something that doesn't just like evaporate over time. It doesn't just become extinct and never comes back again. And I just feel like, based on everything you're saying as well, maybe Tuchel might have to take some risks to try and get some understanding with the players, because I think that game against Man United, one thing that really stood out to me was the miscommunication. Now there was this I think photo doing the rounds on socials. It was that counter attack. We had like, I think, a 4-against-2. Giroud overhits the pass with his left foot. But then I looked at that counter attack and I was thinking, well, all 4 of these guys are so congested together. I didn't see anyone making a Abides run. No one was trying to take a man away, or there was no variation. And it seemed immediately to me that this was definitely like a lack of understanding each other's game and how to play in. And then maybe the questions then become, okay, if there's so many different attacking lineups, how do you build those, you know, I know we say patterns of play, but for me, I think the understanding, the chemistry. Yeah. I mean, I look at like, and this is an extreme example, but MSN back in the day, Suarez, Neymar, Messi. I mean, I've never seen just 3 players able to consistently destroy defenses just like that. But I mean, if you have chemistry and their talent on that type of level, then, you know, it really makes that difference when it comes to breaking down opposition teams. And, you know, now we're in a situation where, okay, we spent big money on attacking players. We haven't been able to find that consistency with them throughout the season. And my thing is, when it gets to next season, I just have this personal fear that we could be set back, because what are we building off from exactly?
Yeah, I think the point about chemistry that you said there is really interesting, because I think when a lot of people see us play, you know, they always talk about, you know, look at how a Mason and Callum link up with Reece, and look at how the academy players link up. It's more often than not, you know, most of them have played together in some capacity, but they've all come through the same system. So invariably, in terms of like their ability to know what players are likely to do, their tendencies, you know, their ability to retain the ball, to lay the ball off, etc. All of that sort of stuff is pretty well established. If you shift it to the other side and you look at I think at times, you know, Chilwell and Werner look like they're playing on different teams. You know, in terms of the chemistry, I think it's so important when you're looking at trying to build relationships within a team. You know, we're talking about attacking, certainly in terms of counters, and certainly in terms of decision making. You know, you're looking at split-second real kind of decisions. You're looking at mishits. You're looking at like little poor executions in terms of detail that can stop the counter that we saw, you know, yesterday. You look at, and again, even looking at Manchester United, that counter they have at the end there, the guy has like a number of different balls that he could play, and he plays the one ball counter he can get to. We're looking at sort of Chelsea, the lack of, I think probably the consistency in terms of team selections, in terms of roles, in terms of what people are being asked to do. And now that I'm sort of talking it through, I think actually one of the biggest things that Tuchel needs to solve is who his number 9 is. Yeah. And because, you know, you look at the way Giroud plays, you look at the way Tammy plays, you look at the way Timo plays, and then you bring in the false 9 element. They're such massively different ways of playing the game. I think they obviously hugely impact the build-up. They impact everything.
Yeah, and this is where things get interesting. I think we'd have to discuss that for the part 2 of this section. But you guys, I hope you guys took something from this. Of course, get involved in the conversation. Remember, this isn't attacks on Tuchel. This isn't, you know, Lampard's versus Tuchel or nothing like that. This is just about understanding some of the imperfections in the team, which is natural, and what Tuchel can do to possibly solve them. So I hope you guys enjoy, and of course, stay ready for the second part.